Hello, welcome all. My name is Jay Labdin. I'm the project director of Gharial Ecology Project. I'm here to talk about the on-ground conservation implications that Gharial Ecology Project has been doing in National Chambal Sanctuary to save this critically endangered species. Gharial Ecology Project finding is not only scientific but also has an real on-ground implications. Some of our findings are unique and rare social behaviors. In recent surveys, we have been seeing there is an increase in the adult male population in National Chambal Sanctuary. Correspondingly, what we are seeing is more male and male combats during the pre-breeding and post-breeding season between the dominant and challenger males. We also study about the chemical and acoustic signaling of these animals. Using radio telemetry, we have been narrowed down the movement ecology of various size classes of gharials. Mobile males, which are like challenger males, actually move up to 100 kilometers up and down even during the breeding seasons. We have seen the adult males and females move both downstream as well as upstream in the Chambal River, mainly to the confluences of the nalas, the small streams, and as well as a big river confluences to feed during the monsoon time. Since 2017, our studies have focused on the top half of the Chambal Sanctuary, where one-third of the population resides. This is already like a rocky terrain which is having pocket habitats. On top of this, the detrimental human activities concentrated on these stretches is having a very negative impact in this upstream stretch. Actually, we have illegal fishing which is affecting the smaller size class animals more than the adults, because the adults, once they entangle, they know how to remove, and eventually within a time span of 10 days to a month they will eventually remove these nylon nets. But the young ones are the ones which are got entangled and eventually die in these nets because they cannot come up, take the net and come up. But the sand mining is the main primary issues that what we are facing right now. After COVID, there is an exponential increase of sand mining all over the sanctuary, especially in this upstream stretch. This is one of our study site, a stretch of 800 meter. It is a pocket of sands in between the tamarisk bushes. What we see here is increase in the number of nesting year by year, and after COVID, you can see it is exponentially increased because there is a lot of sand mining in the up and downstream of this particular stretch. In 2024 December, we were doing a recce for our upcoming catch and tag session in January. This is a small video clip where we recorded around 45 plus adult animals in this particular stretch. Here is a direct comparison of December 2024 and February 2025. In December 2024, you can see the gharials are basking in the same place. In February 2025, you can just see there are just buffaloes which are just grazing there. This is again a drone clip of the same sandbar in 2025 February, where you can see how intensified the sand mining is. They have systematically removing 4 to 5 feet of the top layer of sand using backhoes and tractors and clearing of the whole sandbar, and you can see the tractor tracks all over the sandbank. We come up with a program called River Watch program to tackle the sand mining using the community people itself. So let me tell you in detail. National Chambal Sanctuary is a 425 km of a river stretch and is the only tri-state river sanctuary in India. What you see here in the pink and the blue is the mid and downstream, approximately 240 kilometers of a river stretch, and what you see here in the red is the upstream, approximately 167 kilometers of the river stretch. So if you see, as I told you before, the upstream is more rocky and having pocket habitats, but the mid and downstream is having vast sandbanks and having a lot of habitats. So the population distribution is 1/3 of the population is in the upstream and 2/3 is in the mid and downstream. And if you see the nesting separation, so 33% of the total nesting happens in upstream and 67% of the total nesting happens in downstream. But if you watch, in the total 33% happens in the upstream, 23% actually happens between these two villages, Rajeta and Nadigaon, a 14 kilometer river stretch. This 14-kilometer river stretch we selected for the River Watch program. Our idea with River Watch is to protect the prime habitat, which is like 50 meters from the water's edge, that are the essential nesting bank and the basking platforms for gharials. Convincing the local people not to do the sand mining, and as an outsider, it will be a very hard thing to do. So we are using the local community people who are having an experience work with the wildlife in that area. So for example, Rajaram here and Halku on here, both of them already having an experience to work with the local forest department as a helpers in their projects. So we hire such peoples for the River Watch program. This post-hatch season is the first year where we implemented this River Watch program, and we seen it's potentially like the best way to tackle the sand mining. So we are starting from protecting the prime habitats and eventually try to work with the community people to protect the entire habitat. If we don't protect this habitat now, this last stronghold population in the upstream is going to vanish. Along with the community-led River Watch program, we also use drones to do aerial surveys, which will help us to map the nesting success, but also help us to quantify the sand deposition rate as well as the sand erosion rate. So this will help us to evaluate the success of River Watch program when we compare it to the other stretch where we don't have such program. The next threat for gharial population is recruitment. Many countries actually followed Head Start programming where they collect the eggs and keep them in captivity for 2 to 3 years. But it is worked in some places, but in many places it's not worked well. So the idea of fast tracking the whole process actually came from our tagging exercise that we did in the monsoon survivors. The one which you see that our project officer Yash Sinha releasing over here is a 4-month-old wild young, which is almost like a 1 kilo weight and nearly 1 meter length in the post-monsoon season. So we caught them in October and tagged them and see their survivability. So let's think beyond, not only releasing just juveniles that have been kept in captivity for 2 to 4 years old. In traditional Head Start programs, people often employ unexperienced staffs to shift the eggs from wild to the hatcheries. During this process, often the people who doesn't have experience end up in damaging the eggs, embryos, and also sometimes even they have successful hatching, but the husbandry and the environment which they provided after the hatch is not favorable for the yolk absorption. So this results in stunned animals. After 2 to 3 years, these animals look so small when we compare them to the wild counterparts. Post-release monitoring is almost missing in all the Head Start programs for the past 40 years from 1980 onwards. Recent study by Phoebe in Nepal in the Head Start program animals shows that half of them is only surviving, but even though only 25% of them is actually settle as residents over the released locations. None of the Indian studies actually did any post-release monitoring until 2018 when we worked with one of the DFO, District Forest Officer from Madhya Pradesh Forest Department, who allowed us to put the radios on these Head Start animals. In December 2024, we have an opportunity to work along with the Rajasthan Forest Department, which is another state that has been managing the Chambal Sanctuary, wants to establish a rearing center for themselves. So we proposed this whole fast tracking the whole Head Start program idea to them, and they accepted it, and we have started to implement this. So in this particular idea, what we are doing is reducing the holding time from years to months, and especially focusing on the post-release monitoring, and also focusing on feeding the animals live fishes. The first step is reduce the direct interventions like shifting the eggs or probing the nest, which is potentially end up in predations and all, and also try to commit in engaging experienced staff from our team so that they can train the forest department to do what and when. The next thing is live fish feed of different sizes. So we are providing them a range of different sizes of fishes, and also monitor what is the handling time, especially from capture to the ingestion. And we are so surprised that these animals are like, when they capture, they just swallow them within like very few seconds. The most important thing is try to mimic the monsoonal climate which is naturally happens in wild. So we are providing heat lamps for them so that like to keep the temperatures also high and also the ambient humidity is also high. That is the actual wild temperature that happens in the monsoon season in Chambal. So we like to kind of mimic the whole thing in the captive environments. As I told you before, we employed our experienced staff for data collection and monitoring. They are having the responsibility to train the forest department people, especially the frontline forest staff, and we also implemented security cameras to monitor the feeding and how the animals are interacting with each other 24/7. So these data is being collected and is being analyzed. I like to share the small clip of video to see how they are actually feeding. Here's a close-up of the same. These are all our recommendations for the Head Start program to have a meaningful conservation. And our emphasis is on the post-release monitoring, because without a post-release monitoring, head starting can be turned into like a never-ending story. The another technique the people that use often is translocation of different size class animals, adults, subadults or juveniles also. This must be totally site specific. Why I am saying this? Because each location where gharials exist in naturally all over the world globally is need different recommendations. But the thing that what we have to really emphasize is the first thing, what is our main goal for this translocation, and what is the site specific recommendations that we are seeing here, and number 3, which is the age and size class that we are going to deal with here. So for example, I'm going to tell you like 2 case studies that we have been involved in India. So one is Hastinapur, which is in the upper Gangetic plains, where they re-released animals there. Like it's a totally completely reintroduction. So there were like no gharials before the re-release, and the releases happened from 2010 onwards, and there is a population that is being established there right now, but there is no males there. So in this population, the next thing that can be done is like a male translocation from a different population to this population to start the breeding in this population. But on the other hand, Son Gharial Sanctuary, which is in Madhya Pradesh, and it is also a reservoir population, but in this population there were gharials already there existed, and it is been totally channelized because of the water flow is been totally restricted because of there is a dam that is constructed in the upstream of the river even after the sanctuaries got established. And in this place, earlier they have released 2 big male gharials, but from a captive environment, so they are captive raised males. So they have been released in this environment, and both the captive males died by entangling in the fish nets in 2015. So after 2015, there were like no reproduction happened in this place, and in 2020 they kind of contacted us and asked like, can we able to do like a translocation from Chambal to Son. That's the story which I am going to tell you in the following slides. But before going to the story, I kind of framed out a list of questions that we like to ask ourselves before any translocation exercise. So the first question is like, why we are doing this translocation. So whether we are trying to retrieve or resume a functionality of a population, whether there is an increase of population that you want to do. So what is the reason behind this translocation? Number second, okay, if you have a reason, and what is the age class that you want to translocate. So which animal you want to translocate, like the sex of the animal, whether it's a male or female, and what is the rationale behind the choice. So why you are choosing that particular size and age class. And number third is like, so for example, especially if it's an adult male, we have to carefully see what is its social status, because what we see in here is normally the adult males have 2 different characteristics. Like either it can be a dominant male which is already having a territory and a dominancy in the Chambal or in any wild population, and if it's a challenger or like a mobile male who doesn't have a territory and looking for a territory to take over. So in our situation, what we decided is it will be really good to have the mobile male to be get translocated, so he can easily fit into population or residency there. And on the other hand, we have females, especially adult females. We never did any adult female translocation, so we don't have an answer yet. But the thing that what we know about the females is they move a lot, even more than the mobile males. And they are the one who moves upstream to downstream 360 kilometers in Chambal with our radio telemetry data, what we've seen. So if we are transferring an adult female, like what will happen is yet to explore. And what we can see, the following question is, after who you decided, then you have to see the history of the animal, whether it is captively reared or a wild resident, because it is very important. The captively reared animals, when they release back into the wild, they can just go crazy because they never seen like a vast environment or an ecology. They have been in a captivity for so many years. But on the other hand, if you are transferring like a wild animal to another wild locality, they can have higher chances to adapt to the new locations. So that's the reason why we need to know about the history of the animals. And then when you are doing this translocation, so whether it is a favorable condition for moving animals. So for example, if you are dealing with smaller animals, you have like different protocols, and for you are doing an adult animal, you have to think about like the monsoon, high waters and all, because to catching animals in monsoons will be like really hectic. So what we kind of understand from our experience is to avoid high waters and to avoid monsoonal floods, like especially and high temperatures during the dry season, and also like the very low temperatures, which are like the animals are totally kind of inactive in that time. So we try to avoid the extremes of the temperatures and the water flow. Then I'm going to tell you now about the case study of two translocations that we did for the Son Gharial Sanctuary, which is in Madhya Pradesh Forest Department. And in 2021, we moved a male from Chambal to Son, and followed it in 2025. We again did a translocation. You may have a question like why I'm having two translocations, why we translocated two males. I will answer you in the upcoming slides. But before that, I just want to go through like what we went through when we have these two translocation happen. And definitely in 2021, it's like totally an initial stage. We have to kind of try out everything. So we have possibly seen like what may go wrong and what may go right. And then when we did it again in 2025, we have like a lot of learnings that we learned in 2021. So then we have kind of come up with it. So the initial stage is like basically planning like which animal to target, especially when it comes to a male. So they are like going to be huge animals. So which animal to target, and also as I told you before, we targeted mobile males. So that should be like a recce happen before the catch and tag, so we can able to see where these mobile males are there, which locations we can catch, and where to kind of how we can take them to an higher ground to shift and all. So that's the planning of the whole operation. And then comes the actual capture of the animals and shifting the animals. So here is where our local knowledge actually helps us a lot. This is Pankaj Kumar, the one who is having the white cap with the coolers on the top, looking cool. And he is working with us for the past 18 plus years. He knows more about gharials than anyone in the world. He is the one of the reason why the project is still running. His encouraging activities to go out and track the animals for throughout the year is kept the project running. So he is kind of the man of the time who we can go and ask like, okay Pankaj, like here's the request that come from a forest department, like what are the odds and what are the events in this operation. So he can just say like, okay, this can go wrong, this can go right. So what we did is we captured a challenger male in 2021. He was like 4.7 meters, and we packed him in a ladder which we designed especially for shifting gharial. And this ladder has been put it in a pickup truck. How we taken the animal from the river to the pickup truck is the story that I'm going to show you in the next slide. So we used a backhoe to kind of tie the whole animal with the cage, and then we basically shifted it up. So I'm just going to play a small video to show the process of it. You can see that nobody's panicked, nobody's running behind the vehicle, everybody's calmly walking up because everybody knows what they are doing. So it's kind of an like well planned operation is going on there. And then why I'm saying this is you will see in the following slides about our planning, why it's very helpful for plan these kind of operations. Coming back to the story, we have released the animal, he got adopted with the females and all, but even before the breeding actually happened, what we did is we did a small modification in the habitat. We removed the vegetation from the sandbank and we added more sand so that the animals are actually having good basking and nesting grounds. And what we evidenced is that the animals adopted it immediately, and we have seen successful breeding. And following month in March 2021 we have seen nesting, and all the animals have started to nest. And again emphasizing about the data collection and the post release monitoring. So we have, once we have transferred the animals over there, and once the forest department is actually witnessed the breeding and nesting and all, it's kind of giving them encouraging. So they kind of gone into action and they kind of deployed a particular forest guard to monitor the animal. And we have tagged the male so he can actually able to be track the male where he is moving up and down the new release location. And also they have stopped the illegal fishing and little bit of sand mining above and below the breeding area and the nesting grounds and all. And since we have a facility which is near to the nesting bank, like a rest house of the forest department, so we also implemented a security camera to monitor what's actually happening in the nesting ground. So that's what we are seeing here. On the right is the security camera video of the females on the nesting bank, and that's the security camera itself mounted on the tree. And that's what, like, the happy ending story, like the hatchlings are emerged in June, May and June, end of May and the beginning of June. And we have successfully 5 nests both in 2021 also in 2025, the both years when we released the animals. And what happened in between 2022 2023 is the story that I like to tell in the next slide. So the first male who we released in 2021 moved downstream in monsoon. So because after the hatching we have monsoon everywhere in India, right? So in monsoon the first male who we released decided to go 236 kilometers downstream, and he ended up in a neighboring state, Bihar. And the main problem is he crossed a dam there, and when he was trying to come back through an irrigation canal to the mainstream, they closed the boundary. So what happened to him will explain you in the upcoming slide. But this year what we are seeing, the one male who we released in 2025, the January of 2025, he gone like 80 kilometers downstream, but there is no any dam restriction. So we are still keeping a track of this guy, and he can able to go back to the breeding and the nesting ground of zone. We have to wait and see after the monsoon only. But the real question that what we are having is what the females are actually doing during this monsoon time. Whether they are going downstream or upstream is still a question to explore, which we think like in upcoming years we can able to convince the forest department to work on that. But coming back to the first male which we released in 2021, here's what happened. So he ended up in a completely different state, Bihar, and wildlife laws works differently in different states. So the central federal government has to intervene, and they have to give a letters and all, which they didn't give. So what happened is they caught the animal in an irrigation canal and shifted him, and as soon as they see the radio on him, they called us and they intimated us. And what you're seeing is they kind of, instead of like a cage that developed by us having a ventilation and restraining the animal easily, they have decided to go with an plywood box where the gara is got stuck. So it's like a very poor condition, and this is what I was telling you about, like the inexperienced forest department staff can be very detrimental and can jeopardize the whole operation. So finally what happened in the story is they didn't give the animal, so they planned it to release it in a completely different river system, which is Gandak. And because they said like it is our animal now, so they kind of made a Bihar stamp on the animal, and they released it in Gandak. But the agreement that what we had is we have to give them a crash course on how to shift the animal safely and release the animal safely on the trade-off for our radios, which is fixed on the animal. So I ended up in giving them an whole crash course. But even after the crash course, you can see this is a small video which I like to see. They are releasing the animal in Gandak River, and here it is.
1, 2, 3.
आराम से
1,
नहीं
2, 3. राशि खींच लीजिए।
फर्स्ट क्लास वाह वेरी गुड वाओ वेरी गुड वाओ
So what happening here is they are released the animal and they want to celebrate the joy. They are shouting, and as soon as you see, the animal is just moved slowly into the water without any big deal. But as soon as they shouted, and there's like a lot of talking going on around the animal got scared and he just jumped into the water and just vanished. So when you compare it, like when we are actually transporting the animal even in a backhoe with a very calm thing, the animal can stay calm, and that's where the experience pays off. So the whole idea about gharial conservation, now what we are taking an approach is we have did and also doing an extensive research in Chambal, and also we are getting like fantastic results and findings out of our research. And this is the time when we are actually implementing our research for various conservation measures. So for example, a reintroduction, like as I told you before, like Hastinapur situation where you have already released many animals from the 2 or 3 years old holding facilities, and they established a population now, but you don't have a male now. So whether it makes sense to kind of release wild male from Chambal as we did for Son. But what will happen for Son, you have retrieved the breeding, and you have a successful breeding, and you have seen the smaller animals there, and there's no point of releasing another animal if there is an existing breeding is going on. But it will be very make sense of reinforcing the actual population by using some fast track head starting thing with some post release monitoring also. So we can take some animals, raise them as mimicking the wild environment, and release them back into the wild in Son to reinforce the population with the recruitment. But the whole point of gharial conservation lies on the habitat protection, because we have like very little habitat for these animals, especially in Chambal, having this problem of sand mining and all, and that's where the working with the community involvement is also really pays off. So they are the ones who are living in this place for many centuries, so it makes sense to kind of take them on board instead of treating them as an cat and rat competition between the forest department and the local communities on the sand resource. It's the way now to think about how productively we can involve them in conservation, like the programs like River Watch and all. So our ultimate goal now in Gharial Ecology Project is take our research approach and how we are going to implement our results in the ongoing on-ground conservations. Finally, I like to thank all of our project supporters. I like to thank my teammates who are the foundation and pillars of the project. If you have any questions and comments on my presentation, please write us an email. We are happy to answer it. Thank you once again.